This graphing calculator video follows along with Roman numeral 2 on the graphing calculator worksheet. I will be showing the keystrokes for the TI-83 and the TI-84s that do not have the latest operating system. So for this section, we're going to work on graphing and adjusting our window. So we'll begin by graphing y equals negative 2x squared plus 14. So for all graphing, you're going to locate your y equals button in the upper left-hand corner of your calculator. And if you have anything in your y equals, you'll want to go ahead and clear it out. And we're going to graph negative 2x squared plus 14. Now remember, for the negative, we want to make sure to use this negative key, not our subtraction key. So negative 2x squared. Remember that we have our variable key here that says xt theta n. And we can either square it or we can use the caret button here and raise it to the second power, either one. So negative 2x squared plus 14. Now, when graphing, rather than hitting the graph button right away here, I recommend using the zoom menu. So hitting your zoom key and locating number 6 here that says Z standard, which stands for zoom standard. So go ahead and choose number 6. And you'll see what this does is it has your x minimum be negative 10, the maximum positive 10, and then the y minimum negative 10 and max positive 10 as well. So this way you're always starting with this standard window because you never know what your window was the last time you used your calculator or if someone else used your calculator. Alright, so now let's think about what the shape of the graph should be. Y equals negative 2x squared plus 14 is degree 2, so we would expect it to be a parabola, and in fact it's a parabola that opens down. So you'll notice we actually don't see the entire graph. We're missing this piece here at the top. So we need to adjust our window so that we can see the graph in its entirety. So we need to see more up, meaning we need to change our y values and we need to see larger y values. So to adjust the window, locate your window button. And then we're going to go ahead and scroll down and change our y max. So right now the y max is 10 because we're on a standard viewing window. So we could change it, say, to 20. And then graph again. And now you should see the entire parabola because you adjusted your window. All right, let's move on to number 6, a little bit more advanced function. So we'll go back to our y equals, clear out that function, and now we want to graph f of t equals 0.5 t cubed minus 20t squared plus 5t plus 100. Now notice this function is written in terms of t, so t is our independent variable. However, you're not going to type t on the calculator. You'll always just go ahead and use this variable button. You'll always just type x, even if the function is in terms of another variable. All right, we actually need to type 0.5 x to the third power minus 20 x squared plus 5x plus 100. So again, even though the function is in terms of t, we'll go ahead and use x as our variable always for the calculator when graphing. Now, we don't want to go ahead and hit graph, remember, because we have a window that we changed on the last problem. So let's go ahead and practice going to zoom and choosing number 6, zoom standard. And as it's graphing, again, think about the shape that we are expecting to see. This function is raised to the third power. It's degree 3, so we expect the graph to have an S shape. But look and see what you're actually viewing here. You're not seeing an S shape. In fact, you're seeing just a portion of the curve. So we know it should be an S shape, and in fact, you might remember that if the leading coefficient is positive, we expect this S shape to eventually rise, which means we're missing some of the graph here to the right where the graph is going to go ahead and rise. And then we're also missing some of the graph up here on the top because we're not seeing that maximum that's going to occur. So we need to adjust our window. So if you went to window, if you were to choose, let's say, what we did last time, we changed our y max to 20. So let's say you thought that was a good idea and did that again. But you'll notice when you go ahead and graph the function by changing that y value, that's not a large enough y value. So one option would be to just start guessing. How large does that y value need to be? But a better, more efficient method, rather than just guessing, is going to be to use the table feature of the calculator. So above your graph key, your graph button, it says table. Go ahead and go second table and take a look at your table. So now we can look at the table and we can see how large these y values are. You can see at 0 we're at 100, at 1 we're at 85.5, and so on. So now this gives us a better idea of how large our y values need to be initially. So now let's go back to our window, and clearly 20 is not going to be enough. At 0 we were up at 100, so why don't we go a little bit larger than 100. Let's say we try 120. I recommend you don't change too many of these values in the window at one time. Just change one at a time to slowly find your appropriate window. Better. Now we can see that maximum. All right, but we still have the problem because this graph looks like it's a parabola, but we know it can't be because the graph is a cubic, so it's going to be an S-shaped curve. It has to eventually go down and have a minimum and then rise again. So once again, this is an opportunity to use the table to help us figure out the window. So second table. So now this time I'm going to just scroll down through my x values, and you'll take a look at the y values. These get very, very negative. Let's keep scrolling down. Trying to get an idea of, okay, how negative do these y values really go? You can see I'm down into negative 2,000, negative 3,000, and let's keep scrolling to see, okay, at some time they need to start increasing. The y values need to get larger. And you can see, okay, we hit negative 4,000, 4,500, and now we're getting back into negative 3,000, negative 2,000, and finally going positive again. All right, so you can see that the y values, if I go back a few, the y values got down to in the negative 4,000 range here. You can see it looks like we got down into negative 4,300, negative 4,400, down to even close to the negative 4,500, and that occurred when the x value was 26 and 27. Okay, so that'll tell us that we can go to our window, and my y min, I need to choose something a little smaller than, say, negative 4,500. So let's say I chose negative 4,600. And we said that occurred when x was 26 or 27. So why don't we choose an x max of, say, 30 and take a look at the graph and see now what we see. Looks better. Now you can see that low point. And then let's adjust our window one more time so we can actually see the graph come all the way up and see where it crosses the x-axis again. So once again, back to our table, we can scroll through here and see where did those y values turn positive. And you can see right here, it looks like when x was 40, then we jumped to a positive y value of 300. So we could go to our window and we could choose our x max to be larger than 30, in fact larger than 40. Say we want to go an x max of 50 and graph. And now it looks like we can see the maximum, the first maximum, we can see this minimum, and now we also see where the graph crosses the x-axis. We have a much better window. So one more thing to mention about the table feature. You'll notice that when I went second table, it took me a while to arrow down through all of these different values. So if you were wanting to do this a little bit more quickly, you could change your table set. So above window it says table set. And you can change what your table starts at. But more importantly, right here, this says delta table. That little triangle, remember, is the Greek letter delta, which means change. So this is telling you what is your scale, basically. What do you want the table to go by? To go by ones, or maybe you want it to go by fives. So therefore, if you were to, say, start your table at 0, and go by 5s and then go back to your table. Now you can see the x values go by 5s, and that might be a faster way for you to scroll through and see the changes in the y values without having to sit and use the arrows repeatedly. Always just remember to go back and reset your table to go by 1s. And then one other feature, you'll notice on the graph here that the y-axis starts to look solid, that I don't actually see the little tick marks on the y-axis. And if you go to your window, the reason for that, right here where it says X scale and Y scale, you can see that the Y scale is 1. And the minimum was negative 4,600. The maximum was 120. So it's trying to fit one tick mark along the y-axis all the way from negative 4,600 to 120, which is why we're not actually seeing those tick marks. So if you did want to adjust that, you could say, well, let's say I want to have a tick mark every, let's say, 50. So we could change my Y scale to be 50, and then when you hit graph, then you begin to see those tick marks. And you might think, oh no, those are even too close together. Perhaps you wanted to change that again and say, okay, let's instead go to a Y scale of 100 or 200. And you can play with that Y scale, and that's going to just change those tick marks for you on the Y-axis or the X-axis. So main things to remember when graphing is that you want to use your table to help you figure out an appropriate window.